Hi, everybody, and welcome. This is the Apostate Prophet, and welcome to another episode of The Apostates. Hope you're all doing very well. I'm here today with a guest that I have been wanting to talk to for quite a while. It just didn't work. I think once we actually started, but then I had to cancel it in the middle of it because I had issues to take care of. But anyways, that's all behind us. I'm now here with a guest that I always wanted to talk to. She's an ex-Muslim woman, an activist for women, and I'll just talk to her. I think she can say a lot about herself. Hi, Zara. How are you doing?
Good, thanks. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me. Indeed, it has been quite a while since we've had to record this.
How have you been since then?
Yeah, not too bad. Busy. We just had our no hijab day just a couple of days ago. So that was in prep, and we had planned a lot in advance for it, which went successful and it went really well, which is great.
I've seen a lot of reactions to the whole no hijab issue. I mean, I have been following you online, your activism, and you made some posts that some people found very problematic, and you were attacked a lot for that. What exactly happened?
I mean, the most recent post on Facebook had been about me posting my story, not even an opinion on hijab, on me removing the hijab, and then talking about how it was coercion. I wasn't physically forced, but there was a coercion of the hellfire, and
Uh-huh.
that resulted in a lot of rape comments. That resulted in a lot of, "Oh, you're naked. Oh, she's an ex-Muslim." And I think it was feminism or feminists in Pakistan that reposted that tweet, which was really surprising because I had an ex-Muslim tag on it, and that obviously did not bring in the nicest reactions. I think in over 2 days, it generated about 1,000 comments.
Uh-huh.
Many of them talking about how happy I look and how free I look, or how more beautiful I look now, which I don't think beauty was a problem in the post. I think the thing that was quite obvious was mostly that um, my movement from one to another. But I think there was a lot of there were a lot of comments from people who hadn't worn it that assumed I was oppressed. And while that is true for many, it wasn't true in my case. But when you come to think of it, not having that choice from a young age did, in the end, like when you think of the aftermath, did make me feel like there was a part of my choices that were repressed because I never got it. But yeah, they did result in a lot of reactions. I think people are just scared and they're astonished at women claiming their space outside, not just religion, but just outside the garment itself.
What would you say is your aim with the whole no hijab thing, or with saying that you no longer wear the hijab and that you are for freedom? I mean, what exactly? I'm asking this question because, as you know, the reaction is very severe from some people, and they try to make it look like your position was to be against people who wear the hijab or stuff like that. But what exactly is your motivation in all of this?
So there are two things. There is one in solidarity with women who are trying to remove it, women who don't accept it. And the other one is more about bringing awareness to those who have been, who think it's a choice, but it's not,
Yeah.
right? I don't have anything against people who wear it. My distaste comes against people who impose it on other people. My distaste comes from people who think that those who don't wear it are open to being raped or assaulted or harassed. So there are two of my main objectives. The first one being standing in solidarity with women who have been forced, but um, also women who are at a stage where they want to remove it, but are in fear of isolation, shunning, violence. And a lot of people, a lot of Western feminists who endorse it never think about it. And I'm like, it's fine if you're supporting women who claim to be that this is their choice, there is no repercussions, whatnot. But the reality is that there are millions of others that um, are not given that choice. Would we do the same for FGM? Would we celebrate FGM because some people actually think and they do feel free after having done it? There are people that are like, hey, I got FGM done and I'm happy. But does that remove the negativity behind it or the repercussions behind FGM? Should we celebrate FGM? Is it okay to celebrate FGM?
Yeah.
Right? If we're celebrating hijab, is it okay to celebrate another misogynistic idea? And then the awareness outside of it. Um, it's not an intention to discriminate those who do wear it. Um, I think people have a right to choose what they want to wear if it is a free choice, even even though I don't think so. At the same time, I disagree that I have to respect your choice.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
can respect you have a choice. I can respect that you think you have a choice as well, but I don't have to agree with what you choose.
Yeah, that's often a thing. I mean, we have to. They ask you to respect other people's choice, but what we respect is the fact that they can make a choice. We
Yeah.
respect that, but you don't have to respect the nature of their choice. You don't have to respect the specific thing that they chose. That would be absurd. You cannot expect people to just respect every choice that you make, because people make a lot of very, very bad choices, a lot of stupid choices, a lot of choices that affect themselves in a very negative way, that affect others in a very negative way.
Yeah.
And that might be one of those bad choices that we should never be expected or forced to respect.
Yeah, I mean, it's respect is one of I was just having this conversation earlier, but respect is a heavy word anyway. I mean, if those values do not align with my values, why am I meant to respect it? If that value does not serve a purpose that is good and for the greater good, why should I respect it? Like that, if I don't need people to respect that I'm an ex-Muslim,
Yeah, yeah,
right? I don't need people to respect my values. I need people to respect that I'm an individual that doesn't deserve to be dehumanized and attacked.
yeah.
You don't have to accept what I stand for. You don't have to respect it either, but you can still respect I have the choice to do it.
Yeah, and you see that those people who ask you to respect their choice don't actually respect your choice.
Yeah,
They don't respect the fact that you are an ex-Muslim, or that you are
no,
supposedly naked now because you don't wear the hijab. They don't respect these things. They call you names, and they use these labels. And
no, it is interesting that we have as ex-Muslims been dehumanized by so many. I never get as much of a backlash, even in conversations with Christians, as I would with other Muslims, just for the reason being I'm an ex-Muslim. And like, there's always this, why did you leave? And not in an inquisitive way, but in a more, I'm going to oppose your reasons for leaving.
I always like the irony in that. I mean, you just talked about how we don't get the same thing from Christians, for example, or people who are used to be Christians or grew up among
Hmm.
Christians and who reject Christianity don't receive the same reaction. Whereas if we just say that we left Islam, if we just make that a slogan, a cause, or not even that, if we just make the statement that we have left Islam, we already get a massive amount of hate. And ironically, at the same time, many proponents of Islam keep saying this thing about us ex-Muslims, that we supposedly have an obsession with Islam, and that we have to say that we are ex-Muslims. But why don't ex-Christians say that they are ex-Christians, but ex-Muslims always have to say that
But
they are
they do.
ex-Muslims?
They
Yeah, yeah,
do.
yeah, yeah.
And
And
how one person chooses to identify should be entirely their
yeah, yeah,
choice,
yeah.
right? I think Sam Harris brought up a point about atheism, right? He opposes the label of atheist, but he doesn't have anything against it. He
Uh,
just thinks there's and I'm like, okay, fine, you're allowed to think that, there's no point in having it, but you're not, I think what you can't do is define what we should do.
yeah,
Like, you can't tell me what I should be doing.
yeah.
You can go like, see, I don't see a point in you doing that. And I'm like, well, I do. It's like saying, I don't see a point in you ever stating your religion.
Yeah.
Which, to be fair, I think if people from different religions or whatever, if they only introduce themselves as human beings first, then as of any race, nationality, religion, thing would be in a better place. I
Yeah.
feel like, especially with Islam, people put it at their forefront that all of their decisions revolve around it. We were literally brought up to think that we are from the right religion, and that we're so lucky to be in this religion, and that made no sense to me.
Yeah. I don't know if you have learned the same concept, but there's even a very popular concept in Islam that is that Muslims are one group, that Muslims are one nation, and that all the other disbelievers, all the non-Muslims are one nation. It is like us against them. That is how
Yeah,
I was brought up.
yeah.
That is how many of us are brought up.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I was brought up as a Shia, but we had the same concept, and not even just that. It was just being a Shia versus, and being the Shia that I was in was the right sect versus everybody else. Like my parents, my dad, my mum isn't that opinionated about it,
Uh-huh.
but my dad used to say that the Sunnis reciting their Nikah is not halal because they're not reciting it the right way, because they're not saying the Shahada the right way. Um, so that never like I think one of the biggest problem in general I felt as a Muslim, the Muslim community had, is there was so much discrimination between Muslims. They could never agree on things that that they could never unite together, especially when people were like, look, you have problems in between as well. You guys can't even get
Yeah.
yourself to agree on one thing. That tells you how absurd religion in general is. Because if you think you're more virtuous than another, you're basically just being hypocritical then.
It's funny. I was brought up. I was brought up being taught that Shia are not even Muslims. I was taught that. I was taught that it is us Muslims against the world, and us Muslims meant us Sunni Muslims.
Yeah,
Shia Muslims were not even Muslims to us. They were. I mean, we learned that they are that they are even worse than the Christians and the Jews
non-Muslim.
because
Yeah,
they pretend to be Muslims and they
yeah.
pollute Islam. What we learned always.
So one of the very first concepts I disagreed with when I was like 13, despite like the praying part, like one of the very things that I went into detail was the concept of temporary marriage, that the Shias have the Mutah. And I asked my friends, and I'm like, so why do you disagree with? Because I used to study with Sunnis. So it was an Islamic school. It was a Shia Islamic school, but then they had Sunnis as well. And we would just study the Quran if that was a class, or Islamic studies in general, Islamic. So I'm like, why did you agree to that? Like, and then they were like, look, it was in the time of the Prophet, and then it came, after the other caliphates were in power. Excuse me. After the other caliphates were in power, it was removed. And I was like, okay, well, that makes sense because if you think about it, I don't like how it's being used for prostitution. I don't like that there is a back door or there is like a clause that can be defied
Yeah,
because that's not how Islam should be. So I started having a discussion with my dad, especially at the time when my sisters were getting married and my sister and my brother were getting married and engaged. And I'm like, I still think it's haram. Like, that was when I started opposing it. And that's when I slowly built up that idea that I don't want to be classified as this type of a Muslim. I wanted to just be a Muslim.
yeah,
And then I realized that that concept never really existed
yeah,
because there's so much isolation, that not just isolate, there's so much confusion in just being a whatever Muslim. Like every sect had their own rules. Within sects, they had sects.
yeah,
And that within that, they had individuality that was different. So nobody could ever claim they were going to heaven doing this, this, this. And then that's when like things started breaking down to me, like fundamental things. I'm like, but you said you're going to heaven, and I think I'm going to heaven, but we're doing completely different things and we see things differently. So clearly, God does not know who's going to heaven because he's just trying to divide us. And if we're meant to fight to it, then how are we peaceful people?
yeah. It is. It's funny that you bring that up. I mean, as Shia Muslims have these internal struggles as well. It's not only against, and we went from Muslims against non-Muslims to Shia against Sunni Muslims, but then Shia Muslims among themselves have these have divisions too, have this
Yeah.
big thing too, and among us Sunni Muslims there is a huge problem too. I mean, some people know of it. I was, for example, I grew up among. I grew up into a Sufi Sunni Muslim tradition, and according to traditionalist Muslims, according to many of them, and traditionalist Muslims are probably the majority of English speaking Muslim apologists online. If you look at it, according to many of them, we are not even proper Muslims. We are heretics because we believe in a wrong manifestation of Allah's existence,
Yeah.
and we secretly learn that we should not be hostile to them and not disrespect them, but that they are problematic and that they are not rightly guided.
Yeah.
That's how I grew up. So there is this massive division after division in Islamic society. And ironically, on top of all that, Muslims come and say, well, we are 1.8 billion people, and we're the fastest growing religion, and we are loyal, and we are united, and we are all together. No, you're not. You're
And the
not.
reality is, which Islam is growing? Which
Yes.
Muslims are growing? You can't even answer that. So then they go like, people are converting to Islam, and I'm like, yeah, but which Islam?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think with Shias, like the biggest distaste Sunni and Shias have is on Ashura and Muhammad. Sorry, on Ashura and Hussein, like Muhammad's grandson, and also like the caliphate as well. So this is like from a Sunni's perspective, it has always been that you praise Ali and Muhammad more than you do Muhammad. Sorry, Ali and
I
Hussein
see.
more than you do Muhammad. And I was like, you're actually right. That is actually true, but people don't want to agree to it.
Yeah.
They say like, yeah, but Muhammad was the last prophet, but then, his grandson as well. And there's so much masochism of like with Muharram and Ashura that you're like, what is happening when you see thousands of people beating themselves over something that happened 1,400 years ago? Hell, more people died in the Holocaust
Yeah.
than they did in that war against people who waged those war,
Uh-huh.
right? They could have easily avoided it, but they didn't. Not saying Yazid had a powerful position, but it was like 1,400 years later, these people are still crying over it. And like, it's terrible. Like you've grown up, you've forced their kids to continue beating their chests to that. So I don't like there are parts of it that goes like I don't blame the Sunnis that call Shias like kafirs because you're like, hang on, what's happening? And then, one of the, when people are like, why do you, so Shias have a symbolic alam or like I like symbols that you can kiss and that cures you and whatnot, and you visit the shrines. So I always ask, what is the significance behind it? Like, why do Shias do it and Sunnis don't? Like, why are you giving so much praise to a representation of what is something that meant something to someone 1,400 years ago? And the story of Yusuf came up when he cured his father's blindness with his shirt. And I'm like, it still doesn't make any more, like, it doesn't make any
Mm-hmm.
sense. Like, there is no science behind it. There is no, like, I can understand spirituality having hope, but it just makes no sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And there were just so many little things that started breaking down for me.
For all those who are not aware of all of this, it is basically that Muslims after Muhammad had to decide who their leader, who their successors are. After Muhammad died, three caliphs became the new successors, and then after those, Ali, who was very close to Muhammad, who was also his son-in-law, and also his cousin,
Yeah.
became the fourth caliph, and then a huge disagreement started over that. He was killed, then his sons attempted to take over the caliphate, and a huge internal war started. They were killed in very very brutally, apparently, or so we
Uh,
know.
well, well, the son of Hassan wasn't killed as brutally. Actually, this is fine.
Okay.
Hassan wasn't killed as brutally. He was poisoned. So
Okay. So basically, after Muhammad, the Muslims couldn't agree who is going to lead the Muslim world. They disagreed, started killing each other, and that's where the whole division between Shia Islam and Sunni Islam started. Sunni Muslims. Shia Muslims were those who were loyal to Ali and his children, while Sunni Muslims thought that we should just get on with the caliphate and the way it has historically happened. And since Shia Muslims are so loyal to Ali and his family, they have become known as those who align themselves with Ali, which is why Ali and his family have such high importance in Shia Islam. And since according to Sunni Islam, this is regarded as an obsession with Ali and his family. And Shia Muslims developed a lot of traditions and weird practices that they associate with Ali and his family. Many Sunni Muslims started to call them non-Muslims, and it's just a giant mess.
yeah.
There's a lot
It's
to
it's
explain
it's
here.
a lot to get into detail.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, I feel like you and I, as ex-Muslims, can be more honest about it than even Muslims themselves because they would just end up in a
Yeah,
war.
yeah. If a Sunni Muslim and a Shia Muslim sat here together and tried to explain why it happened that Shia Islam and Sunni Islam separated, they would probably start fighting and yelling, and
Yeah,
it just
it's
doesn't work. Yeah.
but it just comes down to the fundamental thing about one religion or one idea being more virtuous than another. But yeah, that was my background. So I was raised as a Shia in Tanzania, and then I moved to Malaysia for university, finished my high school and moved there. And that was the first time that I'd actually seen a woman from a Muslim background um, who did not wear the hijab. And that was the first time I'm like, wait, hang on. You can be a Muslim and not wear a hijab? Like that is a thing? I didn't understand that. I didn't know that existed. And that's when I was like, I asked my mum a while ago, and I'm like, can I remove it? And she said, no. Um, you can maybe try after you get married and your husband allows you to do it. And I never asked my father because I was always so scared of him. Not that he was particularly abusive or anything, but it was just like these things, like I'll talk to my mum about it. They're just like issues that another woman or like another girl would talk to their mum about it. And that's when it felt like I was either my father's daughter or my husband's wife. And I'm like, but when do I get my life? So I was raised like that, even though like I'm the first girl from my family who got degrees and whatnot and has lived overseas and, made a life for herself and whatnot. It's like I was never ever stopped from that, but I was still brought up with those ideas that I was not equal to a man.
Hmm.
Um, Even though I think my dad was part feminist because I feel like when he raised us and he has like five daughters and one son, he's like, I might as well, like my daughters should know how to drive. My daughters should. He never taught me how to cook, even though he's a chef.
Yeah,
So it was never like you have to learn how to cook, but there was always this idea that I think the camera's blurry.
yeah.
Okay, cool.
Focus.
Yeah, there was always this idea that I was never equal, and it wasn't explicitly told. Like we never talked about inheritance, we never talked about testimony, we never talked about many concepts that I had read after I'd left Islam or in the process. Um, my family paid for my education. They never stopped me. I got a job. They never stopped me. So I didn't particularly come from a repressive background. But there was an idea on like how I was raised where like you had to sit a particular way or you had to dress a particular way or that you couldn't show your hair to these men. And it was fine to show it to my dad, my brother, and my uncles, that I was sexualized from a very young age, and not just by my parents, by Islam itself, because they were just being loyal to the religion. They were just told that this is what a girl needs to do. And they're like, oh, okay, cool. And like, I've always had a very petite build. So when I was 8, I was always really, really tiny anyway. So wearing a hijab on me just felt like, it was like really tiny. I looked at my photos and I'm like, but I look so tiny. I don't have many photos of me in a hijab when I was young. Um, but, it just like now when I think of it, I'm just like, I lived in a community where everybody did it.
Uh-huh.
So when I moved overseas, I was like, you exist? Like, I didn't know this was a thing.
And that's the thing, right? I mean, I think I wrote something about that a while ago. You even saw that I didn't really. I wanted to turn it into a video and wanted to write something lengthily
Hmm.
about it, but eventually I didn't. I might do that in the future
Yeah.
about whether the hijab is a choice or not. And for example, when you go out today and say that the hijab is a tool of oppression, that it
Hmm.
is that it oppresses women and all that stuff, those Muslim women who choose to wear the hijab come out and say, "Well, I'm not oppressed. I choose to wear the hijab." But that's not really what that means. What it means is that in a Muslim culture, it is just the thing to do to wear the hijab. As a woman, as a woman's existence, you are supposed to wear the hijab. The question whether you should wear the hijab or should not wear the hijab is not even a question that is fundamentally there. That's a question that you might ask or others might ask because they become familiar with the reality that some people don't wear the hijab. But naturally, you are supposed to wear the hijab, and
Yeah.
when you start protesting that, when you take it off, then it becomes evident that it is actually forced
Yeah.
culturally.
Yeah. I mean, and the thing is, the reality is that with Faithless Hijabi, a lot of women that have come to me are Muslim women wanting to remove the hijab, but they can't talk to other Muslims about it because they'll only be coerced to keep on wearing it. So a lot of the girls
Yeah,
from my community who live in the UK or have lived in Tanzania, and they'll come anonymously and they're like, I really want to remove it. And I really just want to not wear it, and I don't know how to dress I don't know how to dress outside because I feel naked because I've been told that I'm naked if I don't wear it, but I don't like it. And they're mostly Muslims. Like, I don't think religion is their forefront, that they need to, like, look into it or not be Muslims, but it's mostly that they're not going to go to other Muslim women and ask that,
yeah,
because most of the time most of them will tell them, oh, it's only because your iman is weak, just keep on wearing it, hang on, pray more, you're going to be fine. Instead of somebody going like, okay, well, you don't want to wear it, what are you going to do about it? Right? So nobody really helps them go through that journey. And this is why ex-Muslims, even from Muslims, sometimes get a positive reaction saying, I don't have to agree with you, but you do make some valid points. And I have had a fair share of Muslim women coming to me and thinking they can call me a bitch or they can say abusive words to me, and that apparently makes them better because I'm a kafir and they're not.
yeah,
And then I asked them simple questions like, why do you think Islam has a lot of honor killings? And they're like, it's people, it's culture. And I'm like, okay, but let's think about it. What culture is this? Right? So it's in the Middle East, it's in Northern Africa, that includes part of the Middle East. It's in like Bangladesh, Pakistan. It's in Muslim communities in the West as well. So what makes it culture at this point? Like, or if we talk about any other issues that align with most Muslim women, we're like, so do you now understand that it's not the country or nationality's culture that is coming from this. It's basically ideas that have been passed down from Islam. And yes, some people are more violent than others, and they conduct things in like a more oppressive or like a violent way.
yeah,
And, I have had some girls who are now my friends, still Muslims, and will still lol at some of my blasphemy posts, even if
yeah,
they won't blaspheme themselves. But they're like, we've seen how much abuse you get, and that itself makes me feel ashamed as a Muslim. And I'm like, I haven't said anything different than the reality. I put a fact out there, I will get 1,000 shots from so many Muslims than you would in than you would actually. I would get hit more only because I decided to leave, only because um, I am now spreading false propaganda about Islam when all I've done is put the news out there, even without an opinion. And I think that's where there is a part of Muslims that do support us, and they do come because they see how violent the world outside their bubble is.
Yeah, I got quite a lot of reactions too so far. I still get them occasionally of Muslims thinking, "Hey, I'm a Muslim, but I really don't agree with how these people react to you. So I'm sorry." You know, people say that, and they cannot even give their support or make their disclaimer publicly. They have
No,
to
they can't because
they have to do
they'll
it in secret. Yeah,
exactly because they're being attacked as well, which
yeah,
shows the exact problem that people face in religion
yeah,
and how, liberalism has also been defied by fundamentalism. Like
yeah.
people who do consider themselves liberal Muslims or modern Muslims, and they're happy with that, and they're like, this is my personal belief. But they would also be attacked. Those women who say, oh, this was a choice for me, and I still wear earrings when I wear my hijab. And I'm like, okay, how do other Muslims react to this? What is Islamic ruling on this? Not just hijab, but any action that is not fundamental will always get a backlash that is so hard that you're like, hang on, what is this? Like, I think that's the easiest way to get many Muslims to think about their belief system.
I was I lived in Turkey for quite a while, for a decade or so, and Turkey is known to be one of the secular Muslim countries, one of the very moderate and Western Muslim countries, and I've seen it there. I mean, I knew of two people very personally who wore the hijab and who really didn't want to wear the hijab, and really wanted to take it off, but really couldn't take it off because even if they brought it up, the reactions were very severe. In fact, one person very close to me has recently stopped wearing the hijab, and it took a very long time to get there. This person wanted to take off the hijab for quite a long time, but the reactions were so severe in this supposedly secular, modern, open-minded country called Turkey. And eventually, when I was asked, I just said, "Hey, just do what you want to do. Just do what you feel like you should do, and forget about the reactions." Eventually, it happened, but even there, the backlash is so huge. And at the same time, even in that most moderate Muslim culture, people say, "Oh, people choose to wear the hijab. No one forces you to wear the hijab. And if you don't want to wear the hijab, then you just take it off, and no one cares." Yet they do care. They care
They do care.
very
The question
deeply.
is, if it's a choice, then if I take it off, surely it wouldn't matter, would
Yeah,
it?
yeah,
I actually posted this question to many Muslims from my community, which is obviously close to home for me because I know how they're raised. And I'm like, what if your daughter decides not to wear it? Would you give her that choice? And they always say, yeah, that's fine. And I'm like, are you sure? Because when I talk about it, you insult me about it, right? You put me down about it. But then if your daughter decides to wear it, what are the chances you wouldn't disown her or even put her down?
yeah.
Like it took my family a long time to accept it. Um, so like, and then there were these reactions, like even if I would wear a maxi dress that is long enough, and they're like, "Oh, it's like you're wearing an abaya," and I'm like, different things, right? They are very different things. So like, they would completely put me off from wearing skirts or maxi dress for the same reason that you always try relating it back to modesty, to religion, to like so many things that now even culturally or even like dressing styles of mine, I will do it so that you can't relate to it, so that I don't have to be reminded about it. Because I feel like as ex-Muslims, even now, even years later, there's so much unlearning we have to do. There's so much disownment that has happened that we need to continuously be okay with. I suddenly get hints about, oh my God, what are my baby sisters doing? Or like my baby sister, like what is she studying? What is she learning? Is she being told about religion? Is she like, I remember like the little things in madrasa that I hated, and they were so petty. Like how you pray and how you put your hand. And I'm like,
Yeah.
is she currently being told about this? Like, isn't her time best spent learning about like evolution or like anything, even math, than these crap? So I still get hints of it, and I'm like, I really want to intervene, but sometimes I just have to go like, you know what? I can't do this because at some point I need to maintain that relationship with my family, and that means keeping a part of me to myself. And it is really hard because it's one of those things that, like, family should love you forever. They should always be there for you. You can be yourself, but the truth is we can't.
Yeah, you cannot.
And that's something that goes, beyond just religion, but also like generation gaps. But it still surprises me when younger people, when I see like 18 or 19-year-old boys who call women naked when they don't cover their hair, and or that, you know, any action that's not considered ladylike. Um,
The comparison, the thing comes to mind that that has been used so much in Muslim culture, that Muslims online still use so much, this the picture of two candies, one wrapped and the other unwrapped, and it says
yeah,
which one would you rather, which one would you prefer, implying
yeah.
that a woman who doesn't wear the hijab is like the unwrapped candy that is attacked by bugs, by insects, and
I mean, hijab is always a center of so many topics in Muslim communities. It doesn't end there, but it's the beginning of what is visibly in front of you that breaks down to so many layers because you're like, well, one, men don't do the same thing. So what else is there that women are subjected to that men aren't? And then you go down to the issue of unequal marriage rights. You don't go down to the issue of like sex slavery, and then unequal worth in testimony and inheritance. And I feel like um, as an ex-Muslim, when I came out, I wasn't intending to be an activist. All I did was a podcast because I felt like I was the first one from my community to come out, and I knew how much backlash my parents were getting, and I'm like, the one way I can keep it to public is to actually have a conversation in public. And I was really scared of doing it for a year because I couldn't take the attention or the negative reactions. But I did it. And then I got so many messed up reactions. Um, I wasn't even gay, but I was supporting gay rights. And I wasn't even gay. I'm not gay, and I was supporting and I was supporting gay rights. Um, and even then, there were so many attacks that made me feel like, imagine other women or even other men going through this in their mind, because so many people wrote to me anonymously thanking me for speaking out. And so many people came out as like being gay because they couldn't tell anybody else. I've had people who have told me things that they've never told anyone else. And it was just then, let's empower you to share your story anonymously. And that was the birth of my charity. It started off with storytelling, and then it moved on to like bigger pieces. And then now it's more about creating a community of people who can support other people in those journeys, specifically women, because I feel like women issues are very different. But at the same time, we've had a lot of male support because there's a lot of like I feel like feminists tend to make the unequal rights issue their issue and don't share it with the other counterpart to go like, hey, look, listen to us. Like, let's work on this together because this affects not only the women in the society, but also the men in the society. Because you'll have daughters, you're going to have wives, and you have mothers, and you want them to be equals. You want them to have the same rights as you do. So we've had a lot of male support as well coming out of it. And there are a lot of not only ex-Muslim, but even Muslim men are like, not, I'm not an ex-Muslim or I'm not against Islam, but you are right. Our community does have a problem.
yeah.
And it also starts by analyzing relationships between a father and a daughter, a brother and a sister, a mother and a daughter.
I thought about this. I thought about this for quite a while. I even want to. want to revise it a little bit and maybe publicly work about this. But many Muslim fundamentalists keep saying that apostasy was detrimental to society, or atheism was detrimental to society, which is why it is completely justified that it is banned, for example. Whereas you could argue that Islam is. I would argue that Islam is detrimental to society because of the issue with women, for example. I mean, if you just compare Islamic society to Western society, Western society gives women the ability to be half of society, to be part of society, and develop society further. Contribute with their ideas and shape our societies, shape our world, shape our thoughts, our culture, the way we think. And we do not only benefit from the productivity and efficiency and ideas of men who build stuff and who fight. We also benefit from the minds of women who contribute in so many great ways to Western society. The Islamic world is completely lacking in that. The Islamic world relies on the minds of Muslim men who carried the Islamic world so far and who are still vastly carrying it. The women in the society who could otherwise contribute to society in so many great ways. I mean, don't deny it, people. Muslims, your mothers have sometimes amazing ideas. Your sisters have amazing ideas. The women in Islamic society have sometimes very great ideas that Islamic society could benefit from, but it doesn't, because Islamic society puts women down, doesn't want them in the position of rulers, doesn't want to bring them into the foreground of society, and that is detrimental to society.
I think the important distinction, and while I agree with majority of what you said, but like the important distinction is that a lot of people will then give you examples of Muslim women who have accomplished things. And they're like, okay, great. As a Muslim woman, so did I. But that didn't change anything about what Islam had to say. And I like that you said Islamic world versus the Muslim world, because there is a key difference there. And even when you said Islamic world, I would think of Muslim majority countries, where countries like Indonesia are quite different to countries like Saudi Arabia. But at the same time, it's not like there aren't any repressive laws against women in Indonesia. And then that's where we go, like, what are the standards for women? Like, why do we need to have different standards to go like, oh, well, at least in Saudi, they started driving 2 years ago. See, that's a change. Is that how low our standards are for women? Or like in Indonesia, when people go like, oh, at least one Muslim woman is an astronaut. And we're like, is that the standard? It should be all women. It should be all Muslim women. It should be all men fighting alongside all women to get that equal standard. And sorry, go on.
No, go ahead.
And that I feel like when people give us examples of one or two people, and I'm like, great, I'm happy that this is out there. What else? What are we doing in the larger picture that equates to changing foreign policies? What are we doing in Indonesia when people are getting caned? What are we doing in Jordan or in Turkey, which I think is a bill that is about to go out, where women have to marry their rapists? Right? So like, what are we doing in the larger scale for every other woman that's out there? And I'm not saying that the Western world doesn't have its issues. They do, but not nearly as close as what the Muslim majority countries have.
What comes to mind is Pakistan. Pakistan is actually a country that has a fair share or a good share even of women who are in politics, of women in government. Which might be surprising to some people, because Pakistan is a good example of an Islamic country that is going wrong in so many ways, and I'm not ashamed to say that at all, especially considering that my YouTube channel is banned in Pakistan anyways, and people
Oh,
cannot
wow.
access it. But the thing is, I mean, you could point out that in Pakistan, for example, women are in politics, but that doesn't change the fact that it is some women who are in politics in Pakistan, while many women, especially from religious circles, are not allowed to go into politics or are not even allowed to properly go into the public. It doesn't change the fact that in the ideal Islam, which many Muslims advocate for, women are not supposed to be in politics. They're not supposed to achieve. They're not supposed to have these achievements that they have. It also doesn't change the fact that in North Africa or the Arab world, for example, women are women have a terrible status, and Islam it is Islamic. It is not about culture. It is very Islamic that women are not supposed to rule. Women are not supposed to go outside without the permission of their men.
Yeah.
They're supposed to stay inside if not go out unnecessarily. They're supposed to veil themselves, not speak to others, not laugh loudly, not raise their voice. This is the image of women in Islam, in the ideal Islamic system, Islamic world. And that is absolutely harmful, detrimental to the own Islamic society. And you see that not even Muslims themselves want to keep up with that. Not even the Muslim world themselves not even they want to stay loyal to that, which is why most Muslim countries don't properly follow that anymore. And that's also where we see how most Muslims are not even properly Islamic. I'm happy to say that most Muslims alive today are much better than what Islam demands of them and what Muhammad is and what his religion stands for. Most Muslims are much better than that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, the Muslim women who do speak out against when people go like, oh, but Islam is repressive to women, are also women that are privileged enough to be able to speak out.
Yeah.
See, people in Iran, and Iran is one example, but there's so many other Muslim majority countries, but even in the West, there are women who are not allowed to speak out. Right? So these are like more privileged women that can come out and speak out and write books. And I'm like, great, you're doing great. This is great. Now let's work together. And I'm happy for you to keep your beliefs, but let's work together to change those that can't speak out. And there are a chunk of Muslims that are doing it. But then the larger question is, will Islam support this?
Yeah.
There is a bit of hypocrisy here, right? And I'm like, I love it when people go like, oh, we're feminists, we're going to fight for women's rights, perfect. We're going to do this, we're going to educate them, perfect, great, okay, cool. And you're a Muslim, okay, great, perfect. I love that you're working to help other women, but does your ideology support what you're doing? Right? Are you being a hypocrite? I mean, I personally like, and I think that you're dissenting slowly. I'm not saying you're going to be an ex-Muslim. That's not for me to tell you. But I feel like these are slowly points of dissent. Like modern Muslims are slowly dissenting. I think, a lot of people, when they attack ex-Muslim and they attack me and they're like, these was your family experiences because you were so oppressed by your family. And I'm like, hang on. What do you know about my family? Like somebody just generalized me and said, oh, it's so sad that your family don't talk to you. And I'm like, I just met my family like a few months ago and we just had a video chat on Eid. Like, what are you talking about? But they had created this idea of like, most ex-Muslims leave because they were oppressed by their families, or some of them were never Muslims to begin with. So it's always like their issue. It has nothing to do with Islam.
It's funny. What comes to my mind is just earlier today I remarked how when Yasmin Mohammed was posting about the whole no hijab day stuff and taking off the hijab, I went through the angry responses to that, and what I saw is the responses that come from Muslim men are usually Muslim men who want women to wear the hijab, and the responses that come from Muslim women come from Muslim women who don't even properly wear the hijab, who have the liberty of not wearing the proper hijab. They are free to halfway wear the hijab and to look beautiful and pose for Instagram and post a video on TikTok and whatever. And they'll tell you, well, what do you have against the hijab? Well, who are you to speak? You're not even following the proper hijab. You are not.
And I'm like,
Yeah,
I'd really like you to live in a country that is Muslim majority and enforces it. So
yeah,
then
yeah.
you can go like, yeah, but it's my choice. And I'm like, I'd really like you to say that. I'd really like you to say to those women that I choose to do this. Um, I think, I read this somewhere that there were Muslims in Iran who covered up, who really did not want the enforcement of hijab, because I think for them it ruined the entire image, because they were like, I choose to wear the hijab, but I've seen what happens to my friends who don't.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I feel like there is that narrative that exists, and sure, there has to be accredited something, but the majority of them are people who have the liberty to be in a country where they can technically choose.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, but then obviously, like you said, there are people who actually don't wear the hijab properly. And then that would also come to the, like, the fundamental question, what is a Muslim then? Who is a Muslim? Who are we defining a Muslim to be? And a lot of people will take a stand, oh, as long as they recite the Shahada, it's fine.
Yeah.
And then when people like the Dawa boys come up to us, and then they're like, oh, you were never a Muslim.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I'm like, oh, okay, so you get to now decide who's a Muslim.
yeah.
But when I tell you the same, you're like, oh yeah, but they recited the Shahada. So I'm like, the hypocrisy between both is astonishing. Um,
Yeah, basically, if someone if someone who doesn't really know very much about Islam, just as a hypothetical example, if
yeah,
someone who doesn't properly know Islam, who hasn't read very much about it, or who has just heard of it from friends and this and that, and who found it kind of interesting, and thought I'm going to convert to this religion, if this person comes and just says the Shahada, the Islamic creed, then this person is suddenly recognized as a Muslim. But if we study Islam, think it through, have practiced it in our past, and then decide to leave it, then we are never real Muslims to begin with, because we left Islam. Because that's really the only deciding factor, whether you are a Muslim or not. If you leave Islam, then to them you are not a proper Muslim.
yeah.
It is funny. By the way,
Sorry, go on.
I love your accent, by the way.
Thank you.
Where is that
I,
from?
so I think it is definitely mostly American, because I studied in private schools and then television. And then it has, because I lived in Australia for such a long time, there's a lot of words that are Australian. And then I think I've picked up a bit of English accent. So with some of the words that I say, they can be a little English, because primarily the language I speak and the people I speak to are English. So
Fantastic.
it is very different. A lot of people have no idea where to place it as, which is great. It works in my favor. Um, but I just thought of it. I was talking to a coworker today, and when people call us anti-Muslim,
Yeah.
it comes back to the accent in a way. But like when people call us anti-Muslim, and I'm like, if I was on the road with a woman who was covered, both of us would be identified as Muslims
Uh-huh.
because of our color. Both of us would be identified as like being of the same religion. So if there was a white supremacist who, again, by definition, is like anti-Muslim, both of us would be attacked. So why on earth would I be anti somebody who categorizes me as my form of faith?
Yeah.
Yes, it annoys me, but in the larger context, um, if people want to hate you for what you look like or who you are, I am in that same group. My family is in that same group. And I have always criticized ideas, and then people want to make the assertion that we're anti-Muslim. So that's what I was trying to say with the relation with the accent, was that people try so hard to correlate it that they'll start stereotyping me. Like an encounter I had with somebody at Hyde Park Corner, when he asked, when I said I was an ex-Muslim, and he's like, "Where are you from?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm Tanzanian. I was born in Tanzania." And then he's like, "So are you Indian? Are you Arab?" And I'm like, "No, or like I'm Tanzanian and I have an Australian accent because I lived in Australia." And he didn't know where Tanzania was. So there was no way he could have gone like, "Oh, it's because Turkey, if I was Turkey, so I'm like, oh, because Turkey is like a secular, not real Muslim," or
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
"It's Pakistan, you're always like so enforced," or like it's like, it's the Arab, or like you're Saudi Arabian or anything. And I was like, Nope, I don't fit any of your stereotypes. I don't fit any of your preconceived notions of what an ex-Muslim is.
Yeah, I personally am not. I'm not very Muslim looking. I'm yellow, so that's fine. Uh,
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
I never thought you were from Turkey.
yeah.
Yeah, I never
What
would
did you
have.
think?
First, I thought you were Iranian.
Really?
Yeah. First, I thought
Makes
you were
sense.
Iranian. For some reason, I was like, "Oh, that's my Shia mate," because we still have the ex-Shia,
Yeah,
ex-Sunni debate. And then you told me you were from Turkey, and I was like, "Oh, I didn't think about it.
yeah,
I don't know. Maybe because I don't know many Turkish ex-Muslim activists as well,
yeah,
because a lot of them are like Pakistanis, Iranians, um, Sri Lankans. Um, at least those are the majority of the people
hmm
that I know who are out there talking about it.
yeah.
But yeah,
Nice, Sarah. Where can people find you if they want to look for you, if they are very interested?
so I don't do a lot of videos, but I do have a YouTube channel. Hopefully, I should make more. So Zara Kay, it's ZARAKAY on every channel, so every social media, and YouTube. So Twitter and YouTube would be the best way to listen and read my content. If you are looking for, as an ex-Muslim woman that we support, if you're looking to join our community of other ex-Muslim women to blaspheme and just to chat, Faithless Hijabi. So if you could link that in your YouTube, that would be
I will do
great.
that.
We have a website, social media. We're on social media and we have a website, so everything's all connected with the same name anywhere.
I really like
So
the
that
name, the Faithless Hijabi.
it was meant to be controversial. So especially on No Hijab Day, they're like, "What? Your name is all about a hijabi, and then you post a hijab." And I'm like, "That's exactly the point we're trying to make. That people wear hijab even when they're not Muslims and they're forced to wear it or they have to wear it. And that doesn't account for people who are or who consider themselves as Muslims and still have to wear it." The name had to represent people who were rel not religious people, but specifically from Muslim backgrounds. And then we wanted to make it women specific, so then we can kind of create that parallels between different people coming from different backgrounds, and coming together to talk about the same issue that is so relatable to all the girls.
Yeah, yeah. That's fantastic.
This was really good. I'm glad
Yeah.
we finally did it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm really happy we have this. We finally set it up. Is there anything else you would like to let the world know, let non-Muslims and Muslims and ex-Muslims and everyone out there know?
I think I'd just like to draw parallels between women from honor-based abuse backgrounds. I feel like Muslims and ex-Muslim women have a lot more in common than they would think at first. And it's important to realize that both of us who come from a Muslim background, despite our beliefs now, have been through very similar paths. So I think it's important to keep in mind and show solidarity regardless of what your beliefs are at the moment, because in the end, we all need to work together to make this world a better place,
Yeah.
and that our voice is more powerful than people imagine it to be.
And
Well, thank you
also,
so much for this.
Muslims stop fighting each other. Uh, no, thank you so much for joining me, Zara. It was really I really enjoyed this talk. You're great talking to. I'm happy to have you here. I would like to have you maybe again in the future sometime. I'm sure we'll
Absolutely.
see each other a lot in the future.
Yep.
Others, anyone who's interested, if you have enjoyed this talk, leave a like. You can find Zara on the channels she has mentioned. I will link them all below in the description. I will be here as always again with another guest next time in the Apostates. If you want to see a specific guest, always let me know in the comment section. And I would say until then, Zara, you have a fantastic day. Thank you so
Thank you.
much
You
again.
too.
And
Perfect.
everybody, see you again and stay away from Islam.